There's always something about anime from the 1990s that carries a strange sense of foresight. Stories that felt experimental at the time now feel uncomfortably familiar, and a few anime capture that feeling better than Serial Experiments Lain. Because beneath its cryptic imagery and unsettling atmosphere lies a question that feels more relevant now than it did decades ago. Who are we, really? The person we live as in the physical world, or the version of ourselves that exists online? In an age where technology has woven itself into every part of our daily lives, our dependence on digital spaces grows quietly in the background, while our connection to reality fades just as quietly. Serial Experiments Lane doesn't just explore technology as its over dependence, it also explores identity and what happens when the version of ourselves we create begins to take control of who we are. At its core, Serial Experiment Lane is not a story that presents itself clearly. It feels heavy, almost mechanical, like a faint ringing sound echoing somewhere in the distance, pulling you slowly into something you do not fully understand. The story follows Lane, a quiet, withdrawn girl who exists almost unnoticed in her own world. She isn't expressive, she isn't socially connected. Even before technology enters her life, she already feels disconnected from reality. And then comes The Wired. The Wired, in Lane's world, is an earlier version of what we now recognize as the internet. A space filled with voices, ideas, rumors, and identities, all existing without physical boundaries. Inside it are individuals and groups, shaping narratives, spreading beliefs, and constructing their own realities. And when Lane first steps into The Wired, it doesn't just feel like she's entering a tool for communication, it feels like she's entering a new world. At first, Lane's interaction with The Wired feels harmless curiosity, exploration, discovery. But something subtle begins to change. The more time she spends inside The Wired, the more a new version of her begins to emerge. A version that feels confident, mysterious, powerful, and even though this version doesn't fully reflect who she is, in reality, it quickly becomes what others recognizes her as. Not the quiet girl in the physical world, but the persona that exists inside the wired. And this is where Serial Experiment Lane begins to mirror our reality in uncomfortable ways. Because, just like Lane, we create versions of ourselves online, versions shaped by how we want to be seen, versions influenced by attention, feedback, and perception. And over time, those versions stop being separate from us. They begin to shape us. There's a strange psychological comfort in becoming someone else. Sometimes it begins harmlessly, watching a film, admiring a character, imitating their confidence, their speech, or even their identity. For a moment, it feels empowering, like stepping into another role, a temporary escape, if you will, from being ordinary. It's a strange kind of role play we engage in with ourselves. But the danger isn't pretending, the danger is forgetting that we're pretending. Because just as Lane sinks deeper into the wired, the version of her that exists there begins to grow stronger than the one in reality. Rumors spread, stories form, people interact with the idea of her, not the person she actually is. And this reflects something deeply unsettling about modern life. We don't just create personas online, we reinforce them, we shape them, and we inhabit them at the end. Until eventually they begin to shape us in return, like programmable puppets moving in response to trends, expectations, and digital validation, living not by personal truth, but by what feels accepted. The wired in Serial Experiment Lane isn't dangerous because it exists. It's dangerous because of what happens when reality begins to lose its importance. When attention shifts completely into digital existence, the physical world starts to feel secondary. Relationship weakens, memories blur, identity fragments. And what makes this even more disturbing is that transformation isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it happens quietly, a gradual detachment, a slow drift away from reality, until Returning to it feels unfamiliar because once you begin living through a persona long enough, your original self starts to feel distant, like a memory fading into the background. To me, Serial Experiment Lain doesn't just tell a story about technology, it presents a warning about what happens when identity becomes unstable. In Lane's world, reality can be rewritten, memories can be erased, existence itself can be reset. She can basically start over, but we can't. We aren't mysterious entities embedded in the collective consciousness. We are human, and when we drift too far from reality, there's no reset waiting for us, only the consequences of the distance we created in the first place. The regrets of losing touch, the discomfort of returning to something we abandoned, and the realization that something, or sometimes the persona we create, don't stay online. They follow us back into reality until eventually reality begins to feel like a mask. Serial Experiment Lane is unsettling in its ways, not because it predicts technology, but mostly because it understands human behavior. The desire to escape, the urge to redefine ourselves, the comfort of becoming someone else. Maybe that's why his message still lingers today, because The Wire was never just about the internet, it was about identity and the quiet fear that the more time we spend becoming someone online, the easier it becomes to forget who we are offline.